And after London and everywhere I'd been, Halesworth seemed like a tiny miniature little village. I was 18 in 1942, and they called me up 4 days later after my 18th birthday. So when I joined the Air Force, I was 18 and 4 days.
That's quite young.
Well, considering you're not 20,
Yeah.
it gives you a little idea. At that time, I knew I'd never been to London. I'd got to report to Cardingham. They sent me a travel warrant to Cardingham. But I had heard of somebody else who was going the same day. He was a farmer from All Saints. His father was a farmer. And we travelled together to London, which was my first time I'd been to London. And we were met there by this man's sister, who gave us a good roast lunch and put us on the train to Cardington in Bedfordshire, which was the reception area for new recruits. Here we were kitted out with the uniform and given a mug and a knife, fork and spoon, which stayed with us for the rest of our time in the service.
After a few days of being there, Derek was called to an interview to discuss what he wanted to do. Derek wanted to be a wireless operator air gunner or something similar.
But their response was they didn't take people for aircrew who wore glasses. So they then discussed it, and it was decided that I should become an instrument repairer.
Right. So do you think getting rejected because of your glasses saved your life in hindsight?
I would say 95% yes, because we were losing aircrew every night. I had heard on the radio, on my father and mother's old battery-operated radio, that how many planes went out and how many returned each morning on the 8 o'clock news.
After a few weeks, Derek was sent to Wiltshire for a 3-month training course on the aircraft instruments. Once he'd completed this course, Derek was sent to India.
I was then sent to Pune, which was, part of, it was a home of Indian generals and people. There was an airfield there. There was also a prison there.
Right.
And the prison wasn't too far from our camp, which was an airfield, of course.
Yeah.
And it was there that I became acquainted with Gandhi, I should say, of the position in India regarding Gandhi.
Yeah.
Mahatma Gandhi was a rebellious gentleman who believed in the British, who dominated them, and he was a civil disobedient champion. Every night, masses of people gathered outside this prison and got on their hands and knees and, "Oh, Gandhi," and this went on from these people all night long.
Yeah.
Could have been 500,000 of them. They were there, same every night. There was a sort of a gathering there for them to worship their man Gandhi.
During his time in the RAF, Derek was posted to many different parts of India, one of which being a place called Salboni, which he later named his bungalow where he settled in Wenniston. After some time in Salboni, Derek was then posted to Secunderabad.
And when I got to Secunderabad, we were put on this Nizam's private airport. But he had an airport building, which all airports needed, and he had 2 hangars, which we were able to work in. We had Tiger Moth aircraft, and we were training Indian youths to become pilots. Here again, I did quite a lot of flying, because we had 7 or 8 instructor pilots, mainly commissioned, or 1 or 2 flight sergeants who were pilots, and they were instructing these young Indian men to fly, to become pilots. Working with these other chaps, we were quite a tight little unit, about 40 or 50 of us. Engine fitters, aircraft fitters, instrument repairs, 2 electricians, and a couple of carpenters.
Yeah.
All based in the workshop. I became friends with a carpenter who was also a very good pianist and organist.
Right.
Working alongside me in my little workshop was an electrician, and he was called Raymond Cave, and he and Aubrey, the carpenter, and I struck up a close friendship.
Derek, Aubrey and Ray struck up a close friendship, and they were able to share holidays together during their time in service. They visited many lovely sites, including the Taj Mahal. On one of the adventures, the 3 boys went on a riding trip.
And we went on this riding picnic, and we got on these ponies, and they walked and walked, and then after about half an hour they broke into a gallop.
Yeah.
Well, I'd never ridden on, but that was the most exhilarating thing I ever happened to me, I think.
Yeah.
Because that was marvellous. It was awesome. Anyhow, we got to this place where we were having this picnic, and we had tea and sandwiches, and we tethered the horses, and eventually that was time to leave. We then turned for home, and we walked, cantered or trotted for the first half a mile or so, and suddenly they broke into a gallop. And these horses knew the way home, you see.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And I got left behind because that horse tossed me over its head.
Right.
It went round a bend wrong, and that knew what the way and where the places were that I could get thrown.
Did it do you any damage?
No, incredibly not. Every 300 or 400 yards, that horse had me off 7 or 8 times, and I was alone. And I clung on to the reins. Had I just let that rein go, I would have lost that horse, and I would have been lost on that mountain. Mind you, they had to come back to look for me, I expect.
Yeah.
But I held on.
When they were back in Secunderabad, they were in their hangar one afternoon when the news they were all waiting for came through.
We were in the hangar one afternoon in the August, and somebody came in and said, "The war's over. We're all going home." So I said, what's happened then? Well, what had happened, of course, was the Americans had dropped these atomic bombs on 2 or 3 Japanese cities.
Yeah.
And they were so powerful they wiped whole cities out. Of course the Japanese emperor, they got no answer to it. So the Japanese emperor gave instructions to the Japanese to down arms.
Right.
So that was a terrific relief for the Western countries in, in Europe and us in America.
Yeah.
To think that we wouldn't get any more killed.
Yeah.
Although the war was over, Derek still had another year left in service. This was because he was a single man. During that final year, Derek was sent to Sumatra via a transit camp in Madras. They were sent to Sumatra to hand it back to the Dutch.
When we got there, we were supposed to hand it back to the Dutch. But the local people, under the direction and influence of a man named Sukarno, had other ideas, and they didn't want the Europeans back.
Yeah.
The Dutch, really. So the Japanese soldiers were no trouble. They were prepared to be rounded up. They'd had enough warfare. They didn't want to get themselves killed.
Yeah.
But we had to go everywhere armed because we didn't know which of the locals was friendly and wanted them back and which were against it.
Yeah.
And that was the first instance, really, of terrorism as we know it today.
Yeah.
You don't know who your enemy is, and we didn't know then.
Yeah.
In the June of 1946, Derek's papers had finally come through. Derek could head home.
My papers had come through for be repatriated
Right.
to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Well, they gave me this party and I stayed out all night. When I went back to camp, there was a sergeant on the gate. He said, "Hello, where have you been?" I said, I'm going to be repatriated. They gave me a farewell party down there. Well, I didn't know you were off the camp, he said. You ought to be more careful. He said, we lost part of the guard during the night up on the airfield. He said the terrorists came along and cut the guard was the RAF regiment, and these terrorists, they were doing 2 on and 2 hours on, 4 off.
Yeah.
See, and those that were off were getting their head down for it, and they attacked them in their beds.
It was kind of lucky that you were away from camp.
Yeah, but this was on the edge of the airfield, not where we were living, but where, on the edge, up on the airfields, where the RAF regiment
Yeah.
were guarding and protecting us.
So did you keep in touch with your friends you'd made, like Ray and Aubrey? Did you keep in touch with them?
I did. I went to be Aubrey's best man the year after. Yes, well, eventually I got put on a plane to Singapore, and from there I was in a transit camp, and then eventually I was shipped with 8,000 other men from other services as well as the RAF. We boarded a Mauritania in Singapore, and we left there and we came home and docked at Liverpool after 17 days. I met up, I felt awful. I was met off the train at Aylesworth by my father and mother, who'd been to church that Sunday evening, and they came and met me off the train. And after London and everywhere I'd been, Aylesworth seemed like a tiny miniature little village. And so I spent the next 2 or 3 weeks at home in Aylesworth before I had to report back to the RAF at RAF Leaming.
Right.
Because I hadn't been discharged.
Yeah.
And in fact, this is now August, but in fact I didn't get discharged until January the next year,
Wow.
New Year. I was discharged from the Air Force with a pork pie hat and a grey pinstripe suit, like the rest of them, £50 gratuity. First thing I did was bought a new bicycle for £5.